I wish to thank the organizing committee, Dr. Shimon Rahmlevich, Dr. Naftali Lazarovich, Dr. Berliner, Dr. Baron O, representing UNCCD, to give me the opportunity to be a participant in the last session. My talk would be feeding the dryland challenges in a changing environment. With regard to the changing environment, the drylands are being impacted by the climate change. At present, the dryland cover about 61 million square kilometer. 80% of agricultural land area is rain-fed, which produces 65 to 70% of staple foods. Water scarcity affects and will affect food production in drylands. Drylands are prone to climate change, and global warming trends are double than those over humid regions. Soil degradation and desertification, severe problems in drylands, will be exacerbated with climate change, and a large proportion of 2.5 billion poor people in the world living on less than $2 per day live in dryland areas. These are amongst the challenges that we need to address. Furthermore, the drylands are expanding with the climate change. Climate change is increasing potential evapotranspiration, and thus the aridity of drylands and susceptibility of this fragile land to desertification. Globally, dryland may expand by an additional 10% compared with 1961-1990 baseline. Deep soil layers may become increasingly dry during the growing season, leading to a major shift in vegetation and ecosystem service delivery. Reduction in soil moisture leads to warming that accelerates evapotranspiration and further reduces soil moisture even in the deeper layers. For wheat, maize, barley, there is a negative response of global yields to increase in temperature in the dryland ecosystem. The aridization line is shifting. The dry edges of the tropics are heading polewards at about 50 kilometers a decade. The line of aridity defining the American West has moved roughly 230 kilometers east since 1980. The population of the dryland cities is also going up because most of them are in developing countries where the population is increasing. And by 2100, 8 years from now, the population of some of the cities will be tremendously large. Dar es Salaam, 74 million, Delhi, 57, Khartoum, 57, Niamey, 56 million, Kabul, 50, Karachi, 49 million, and Lilongwe and Cairo, 41 million. And yet the problem of desertification is increasing. Therefore, achieving land degradation neutrality by restoring degraded lands and protecting land against degradation, the daunting challenge as it is the highest priority of UNCCD and need to be addressed by 2030 by all member countries. That brings me to the question of managing the climate change. It can lead to reducing severity by mitigation, through avoiding emission, through sequestering emission, and it can reduce vulnerability through adaptation, such as adopting technologies or increasing ecosystem resilience. As far as the ecosystem resilience is concerned, mitigation can play a very important role because it involves specific soil and land management activities to reduce the extent and severity of climate change. And the goal of mitigation strategy is to enhance carbon sink capacity of the land, that the soil and vegetation, and reduce, therefore, the net anthropogenic emissions. Adaptation to climate change in the dryland has several options. Alleviating drought is number one by increasing soil water storage, storing water in the root zone, improving water use efficiency by restoring soil health, restoring soil health by improving soil organic matter content. You notice these are step-by-step things to follow. and reducing losses of soil water by evaporation runoff, very high evaporation demand. And of course, finally, growing crops and the management system adapted to arid climate. And that is the climate resilient agricultural system designed to adapt against climate change. At this point, I'd like to emphasize the tourism that I believe in, that the health of soil, plants, animal, people, environment, and the planet is one and indivisible. When the health of soil goes down, everything else goes with it. Therefore, in addition to socioeconomic factors, food security and environment quality research must also address environmental and resource management issue, especially restoration of degraded lands and achieving land degradation neutrality. Enhancing ecosystem resilience, we can adopt restorative land use, afforestation, reforestation, avoid deforestation. We may improve soil physical, chemical, biological quality. We can conserve resources, water, nutrients, energy, and we can address, of course, the human behavior, the human dimension, the socio-economic, political issue, the governance, the willpower of governance. And these together is what we call managing the Anthropocene. That brings me to the very key factor in drylands, and that is the water productivity. Water productivity is the key factor to increasing agronomic productivity or net primary production of the land. Soil being the best reservoir to store green water, it is very important that restoring soil health can lead to increasing water productivity and to adapting and mitigating the drought. Many examples have shown that if you can increase organic carbon content in soil by 1%, you can tremendously increase the soil water storage capacity, the so-called green water or the plant available water capacity. Example from Sullivan Scott, he said soil can hold an extra 16,500 gallon of water in an acre foot by increasing soil organic matter by 1%. Gold, he said increasing soil organic matter for 1 to 2% would increase the volume of water to 3 quarts, 2.8 liter per cubic foot of the soil. Tremendous increase. Compost can hold 20 times its weight in water. So obviously, some way or the other, adding biomass carbon to soil is a very critical factor. The one thing which is important is the grain yield, an equation that I'm going to discuss in a moment, uh, does not depend entirely on fertilizer per se, but how the fertilizer affect other factors of water productivity, which I'll come back to that in a minute. And the equation that I'm going to describe, it applies regardless of whether it's a rain-fed crop or irrigated crop, grown in an arid climate or humid climate, under limited or adequate condition, under insect, pest, or pathogen. It all really is the common thread amongst all these factors of the equation is water. Water is the key thing. It's all about water. And from that perspective, the equation says grain yield is equal to evapotranspiration multiplied by transpiration divided by evapotranspiration multiplied by 1 over transpiration ratio multiplied by harvest index. All these 4 variables are water related. Therefore, the fertilizer management, the tillage, the pesticide, herbicide, everything else governs yield through their influence on these 4 factors, which is grain yield, kilogram per hectare of dry grain, evapotranspiration is kilogram per hectare of evapotranspiration, T over AT is the fraction of evapotranspiration transpired by crop, T are the transpiration ratio, kilogram of water transpired to produce a kilogram of background biomass, and HI the harvest index, kilogram of dry grain divided by kilogram of above ground biomass. This is the equation we have to manage to make dry land more productive. This is the equation which we have to change all these factors through varieties, through fertilizer, through tillage, through pest management. But this is the equation because on dry land, it's all about water. Improving soil organic matter content can also improve water retention capacity. For example, the pH curves of the soil. Here's the soil with organic matter and without organic matter. The available water holding capacity is much greater in a soil with organic matter than in the same soil with less organic matter content. Therefore, when we talk about fertilization, the focus is on carbon, how to improve organic matter content. If you have more organic matter content, there's a more water, the soil becomes responsive to fertilizer. Otherwise, a dry, arid, hard soil is not responsive to fertilizer. Fertilizer put under those conditions are a liability. They leak out into the environment, and of course, they are expensive. That brings me to the question of what is soil health. It's a soil's capacity as a dynamic and biologically active entity within natural and managed landscapes to sustain multiple ecosystem services both for human and nature. Human are part of the nature. Our focus should be on benefiting nature. And when the nature is benefited, human benefit automatically. That's the way it should be thought about. And the idea is input of biomass to the system, which is not easy in the dry climate, but that is the most important component of managing soil health. The soil organic matter content also reverses desertification. As the organic matter content goes up, the desertification risk index goes down linearly, and that's well proven. Many indicators of soil restoration of degraded desertified land are plant-based, soil-based, and water-based. Plant-based indices such as depth of root penetration, mean residence time of water in soil, biological crust to prevent erosion, soil aridity index, normalized difference vegetation index in terms of soil depth, texture, stoniness, structure, pores, macropores, pH, electrical conductivity, cation exchange capacity, nutrient reserve, soil organic carbon concentration, and stock. And of course, hydrologically, plant available water capacity in the root zone, the so-called green water, and the water balance. So we can use this because the carbon is such a key factor. I like to say something about farming carbon. Growing soil carbon as a farm commodity that can be traded, bought and sold, and create another income stream for farmers. And this according to the payment of ecosystem services at $130 per ton of carbon, which translates to $35 per ton of CO2, which is equivalent to about 25-28 euro per ton of CO2, which is very close to the market in Europe that already exists, which means if a farmer can sequester half a ton of carbon in soil and vegetation, that farmer is entitled to payment of $65 per hectare, $26 per acre. If farmers sequester 1/3 of a ton of carbon per hectare, it's $33 per hectare, $17.50 per acre. That brings me to the next topic of rights of soil. Soil is a living entity. Like any other living entity, such as rights of humans, rights of animals, there must also be rights of soil and rights of nature. Being the essence of all terrestrial life, soil must have rights to be protected, restored, thrive, and managed judiciously. And the violator of basic soil rights, degrading, polluting, desertifying deliberately, must have some legal implications. And it is the soil health on which depend many ecosystem services, whether it's a water quality, renewability, climate change adaptation, mitigation, stabilization, food and nutrition security, and of course, above and below ground biodiversity. Why? Because soil health is the engine of economic development. Soil carbon, soil health are also essential to keeping this sustainable development goal on the track, which unfortunately are not at the moment, and especially so because of the COVID-19. Goal number 2, ending hunger. Goal number 3, climate action. Goal number 15, life on land and land degradation neutrality. Goal number 1, ending poverty. Goal number 3, good health and well-being. Goal number 6, clean water and sanitation. Goal number 7, renewable energy. And goal number 17, justice and peace for all. All depend on soil health. Therefore, I hope and I urge in your closing session regarding the importance of translating science of dryland farming into action by linking with sustainable development goals and scaling up to regional and global level by networking, cooperation, and building bridges across discipline and political social boundaries. I'm sure Dr. Baron Orr will talk about it. UNCCD is committed to translating science of dryland into action through science policy interface, for example. Why it is important? Because I think global peace and prosperity depends on soil health and land quality. Why? Because degrading land, denuding landscapes, recurring drought, intensifying heat waves, low crop yield, perpetual hunger, marginal living, and desperateness are the real threats to global peace and security, and they have to be effectively addressed through land degradation neutrality, through restoration of degraded lands. Lastly, I would like to share with you my firm belief that famines are man-made tragedies, and they are really perpetuating in the dry lands. And we must make famine and mass starvation politically intolerable, morally toxic, ethically unthinkable, and humanly unacceptable. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. I wish you a great conference, and thank you for organizing this 3 annual meeting on the important topic of managing degraded lands, dry lands of the world. Goodbye.